And now we cross over to our Oh Soo-young for global insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thanks very much, Morgan. It is time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. The annual Seoul Dialogue on Africa begins this week to explore how South Korea and countries in Africa can broaden and strengthen their relations. And it may only be the fourth time that this conference is being held, but it's becoming more and more significant as the two sides look to expand cooperation not only in trade, but various global challenges. We discussed this special relationship today with Boris Ondo, founder and president at the African Youth Action Foundation. It's lovely to see you again, Boris. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you for having me, Soo-young.
Right. Well, thanks for joining us. And well, let's start with this Seoul Dialogue on Africa, which has been taking place for the last few years. What is the significance of this forum, particularly amid this ongoing pandemic? I mean, what kind of key discussions are you expecting to hear?
Well, thanks again, Soo-young, for having me on your show. There's never been a time in history like today when multilateralism or multilateral cooperation is needed in global issues, such as the pandemic, as you rightfully mentioned. And I think that as the dialogue with Korea is starting on the Korea-Africa relation is starting, we're looking at more prospects of mutual beneficial partnerships between South Korea and African countries. But we are also looking at an interesting cooperation to better combat, to better address the issues of COVID-19 pandemic. We are also furthermore looking at the discussions to approach the Korea-Africa relations and raise people's awareness of Africa in Korea. So overall, there are a lot of interesting topics that we're looking forward to having addressed at this Korea-Africa dialogue coming up.
Well, developments in Korea-Africa relations are relatively recent. They're considered to have taken off in 2006. What's been the main form of engagement or relations between the two sides, and what have been some milestones?
Well, true. Korea-Africa ties are considered to have taken up in 2006, but Korea-Africa ties actually go way back, even since the Korean War. And after the Korean War, we've had a good number of African countries who have helped the Korean people during the Korean War. Countries like South Africa, countries like Ethiopia. Korea then received support from those countries. Even after the Korean War in the 1960s, 1970s, the ties with the African countries have started with the establishment of different diplomatic relations with African countries and different state visits or presidential visits and political support of African countries in Korea and Korean countries to Africa. We have the visit, for example, of the president of Gabon, who visited Korea in 1975, and President Chon Do-won of Korea, who visited several African countries in 1982. And Korean even obtained the status of observer at the African Union in 2005. And that's how, after 2005 and 2006, the ties really took a different turnaround. And we have seen different activities that have been organized, different dialogues, different declarations on the Korea-Africa forums, the Korea-African Declaration of 2009, the Seoul Declaration of 2012, the Africa-Korea Framework of Cooperation between 2017 and 2021. We also have visits of Korean presidents to Africa. For example, in 2011, we have President Lee Myung-bak, who visited South Africa and the Democratic Republic of Congo and Ethiopia, for example. We have President Park Geun-hye, who has visited in 2016 different African countries. So Korean-Africa ties go way back, and we expect them to go even stronger as the dialogue, like the Seoul Africa dialogue, has installed, so that mutual beneficial partnership, mutual beneficial interest can find a way to find common ground on leveling them up on such a time.
Right, of course, and well, South Korea certainly commemorates every year the sacrifice of many African soldiers from South Africa, from Ethiopia, who really sacrificed themselves to help fight communism in this country and really help this nation build itself to what it is today. And well, in recent years, though, we've been cooperating on development as well. And what's distinguished South Korea as a development partner? Are there any programs that really stood out to you?
Certainly. Korea has been very excelling on the ODA program towards African countries. For example, for several years, African countries have been receiving a lot of aid from Korea, and Korea has been establishing programs like the Korea Government Scholarship Programs, which have been one of the beneficiary, and different other development programs with organizations like KOICA on the ground in Africa doing good work. And there are many other programs like the Semaulundong program that has also been implemented in many African countries. Well, Korea, Africa share very much a past of colonialism and extreme poverty and interesting revolutions and democratization history. And Africa today is evolving from these issues that Korea has overcome already. And I think on this common, similar past that Korea and Africa share, there is a huge possibility and a good potential for great relationship or greater relationship in the future. And we really much look forward to having such with events like the Seoul Dialogue Forums organized today.
Well, for now, it seems like we're still in the stage of discovering how we can expand this cooperation, whether it's through trade or cultural exchange. But how is South Korea generally perceived in the countries on the African continent that it has engaged with so far?
Well, I wouldn't venture on trying to talk for all African countries, but from my independent observer's eye, I feel there is still some distance in the relationship between Korea and Africa. Perceptions are still very distant. Perceptions are still distorted, and there's still great work to do to bring them to a good fix. African countries don't know Korea much yet, and Korea, on the other hand, as well, doesn't know African countries much yet. And good initiatives like the Korea Africa Foundation that the Korean government has launched through its Ministry of Foreign Affairs to help Korea have a better understanding of the African continent is actually something we need to salute. But obviously, more needs to be done to arrange or bring that perspective, that perception of Africa in Korea to good fix, even that perception to Korea in Africa into good fixes. And I'm very optimistic that given such programs, such events, and many other programs that can come ahead, we will get to a good level of that.
Well, many countries around the world, they see a huge growth potential in Africa. And well, South Korea's a little late to the game, to be honest. But well, and because of course, Africa already has a number of traditional partners and new entrants that aim to maximize their interests in the continent. What are some core shared interests that South Korea could maybe leverage and work on with Africa?
Well, as I said before in the beginning, Korea and Africa share a very interesting, similar history. Just like African countries, Korea has known colonization. Just like many African countries, Korea has known extreme poverty and many democratic issues as well. So I consider that there couldn't be a better partnership that would exist if not the Korea-Africa partnership, because the bound could be really tight, given on a good understanding of each other, given a good empathy for each other. So I believe that if those things are looked into, this is a relationship that could go a long way. and one of the partnerships that can be much stronger in our period of time today.
Well, today we're seeing this US-China rivalry in the world sort of expanding into the African continent. And well, how do you see that affecting the continent's plans for economic and diplomatic expansion?
Obviously, it has, when the two largest economies in the world are fighting, are into a rivalry, stand by countries that are just smaller economies will definitely suffer from it. And we have seen that in the past 2 years, how that US protectionism has been destructive to some African economies. And diplomatically, there's also been a risk of adding the perception that the US is apathetic towards the regions of Africa. And ultimately, that perception has led the other one, larger economy, Beijing, to use it as a trade war to sow anti-US sentiment and bolster its image in Africa in favor of foreign partners like itself. So I think that that rivalry has been an impediment to many African economies, and it has also played a huge significant point on the diplomacy of many African countries.
Well, it seems that infrastructure is going to be is going to have a lot of sticking points due to this US-China rivalry. And do you think maybe perhaps that's an area that South Korea and Africa can work on, given that South Korea has a number of telecommunication companies and IT companies that could really join hands with maybe local providers and manufacturers in Africa and really foster a new sort of tech relationship?
Definitely. This is a branch that South Korea could actually grab and penetrate the African market. It is an opportunity that is given. As I said, the US-China war or rivalry has changed many paradigms in the diplomatic sphere of the African countries. And I personally believe that it could be high time also for the African countries to look east into their diplomatic strategy, and looking east, Korea could be one of those good partners, given the know-how that it has and the enormous potential that Africa has in terms of natural resources, its youth, and the opening market that is rising in Africa. So South Korea could do well to really seize that opportunity to penetrate the African market, which is still very open and with many opportunities that are still there. South Korea would do well to seize that opportunity, bringing its know-how to Africa, especially in areas that it excels, like IT, technology, semiconductors, and so on. There are opportunities in Africa for South Korea to seize, but it boils down to that capability of South Korea to see Africa as a land of opportunity and bridge that distance that still exists between the two regions. And it is high time for that to happen. And events like the Seoul Dialogue on economic forums like that are really opportunities for these points to be addressed and these opportunities to be presented in a better way and highlight them and also enlighten the perceptions of both Africans and Koreans on the enormous possibilities that a good partnerships between the two regions could bring and the beneficial bounds that exist there.
And well, you've played a very central role here in South Korea in terms of leading efforts to gather young people for collaboration and innovation. How can young people really foster and benefit from the potential of increased South Korean-Africa relations?
Well, Africa is considered and is even called the Blue Continent, a very young continent. As you know, more than half of the African population is a young population, and it is expected to be younger by the year 2050. So the young people today are those who will lead Africa tomorrow. And if we bring them together with Korean young people today, we are sure to be building a solid partnership for the future, and a partnership that could really help a relationship bolstered between Africa and Korea. So part of the efforts that we have been leading in the African Youth Action Foundation is really to not only empower the African young people for them to be an interesting and outstanding tool for development in their respective African countries, but also to help them see how Korea has evolved over the years, how Korea has developed over the years, and take it as a great example for prospective development back in Africa. And I think that it is the same effort that the Korean government should be also putting in, because investing in African young people today is actually investing in a stronger partnership between Africa and Korea in the future. It has already led a lot of efforts in that sense. As I said, I'm one of the beneficiaries of the Korea Africa Scholarship that has been provided by the by the Korean government for a long time. And I think multiplying such initiatives and investing in African young people is going to be very beneficial for the Korean government in the future.
So a lot of potential and a lot of new exciting opportunities to look forward to. Thank you very much. That was Boris Ondo, founder and president at African Youth Action Foundation. Again, it was lovely speaking to you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.